Welcome back to Viewpoint. I'm Jim Zogby, and my next guest is Susan Rice. She's Senior Fellow in the Foreign Policy Studies Program, the Brookings Institution. Dr. Rice is former Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs and former Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for African Affairs at the National Security Council. Thanks for joining us, Susan.
Good to be back.
Developments all across Africa. I mean, significant developments, not always good. But this has been an enormous couple of weeks, and I want to talk to you about them. I remember when Ethiopia first went into Somalia. Had a couple of different experts on the show. I think some of them you know, Ken Menkhaus being one, who said this does not bode well. This is not going to come out okay. And there were others who were saying, you know, in effect, almost like slam dunk, we did it, mission accomplished, the Islamic courts are gone, and we're now seeing the playing out of some really difficult times, not only in Somalia, but also now in Ethiopia, with what was being warned about, and that is some of the tribes in Ethiopia that have Somali ties carrying out acts of terror in the state itself. Talk to me a little about where you see this going, and what you think could be done to sort of unwind this situation.
Well, this is obviously a really complicated mess, and it doesn't serve the interests of the Somalis. It's Ethiopia's security is at risk, and obviously U.S. security is at risk. And I think it's probably counterproductive to go back and do the whole "Who Shot John" and rehash it. But where we are now is Ethiopia is the principal provider of security, for better or for worse, for the transitional government. The militia and the Islamists are still got a lot of fight in them, and the people of Mogadishu have been the victims. There is a need for this transitional government to become more representative, to be broadened, and to obtain a measure of control over Mogadishu and the rest of the Somali state. Otherwise, we're going to have continued chaos, collapse, and failure, which serves nobody's interest except, as the New York Times reported, some entrepreneurs who profit from paying no taxes. So the question is, how do we get there? And there are political aspects to it which the transitional government has not managed well enough, and that's bringing in those from the multiple clans and other sides that can make a contribution of some fashion. But there's a security imperative as well. Part of the reason why Ethiopia is bogged down is because there's been nobody to come to allow them to withdraw. The African Union has sent only 1,500 Ugandans who've stayed essentially in their base, so they're not adding a great deal of value. The rest of Africa doesn't have the capacity, spare peacekeeping capacity, to step up to the plate. We knew that before this happened because they haven't been able to deploy sufficient numbers of troops to Darfur. So the international community has an obligation here. We have all of us a bad history and bad experience, but I think Ban Ki-moon was right when he came to the council and said this may be yet another instance where we need an ad hoc coalition to support the provision of security to the Somali people. It's a horrible prospect to envision yet again, but the alternative is arguably worse.
One could argue, though, that Ethiopia went in on its own and now needs its fat pulled out of the fire, not unlike the situation, the problem we're having in Iraq. Wait a minute, Jim.
Ethiopia made a decision to go in, facing a significant security threat. And if anybody tells you without a wink and a nod from the United States, I think they're lying. So it's not entirely on its own. But, you know, the worst thing Ethiopia could do is to walk out tomorrow, which it could.
And it keeps making noises about it, but it can't.
No, it sure could.
Yeah.
I mean, Ethiopia could take the view, and it's a lot easier for them in Somalia than it is for us in Iraq. We'll come out and we'll sit back until the situation gets bad again, and we'll go back in. This is not the first time they've been in there. They've been in, you know, repeatedly in the past. It's cheaper for them to stay out and go back in. But that wouldn't be in the best interest of stability there. So we do all have a dog.
Is there a danger, though, of this problem following Ethiopia home?
Absolutely. But we wouldn't even say follow it home. The danger is that Ethiopia is a very fragile, fragmented society which has had its own rebel problems for quite some time. It's got Eritrea, which is actively fomenting these rebellions and arming and funding the Islamists in Somalia. So, this is a mess. So the danger is that as long as Ethiopia is preoccupied in Somalia, it gives a window of opportunity to the internal folks who are interested in taking down.
Are you pleased with the agreement that Ban Ki-moon reached with the Sudanese to expand the force?
No. We have really lost sight of what is at stake in Darfur, and we, meaning the United States and the rest of the international community. We have 450,000 people dead. 2.5 million refugees are displaced, and the region imploding. The Security Council passed a resolution last August to put in place a serious and robust force of 22,000 people. We rolled that back to a weakened hybrid force of 17,000 that had to be comprised of Africans who don't have the capacity to contribute. And now we're celebrating because Ban Ki-moon got the Sudanese to agree that 3,000 of those 17,000 could deploy. But we don't know where the troops are coming from. We don't know if the Sudanese will break their promises as they have in the past. And we still have no agreement from the Sudanese government even to this weakened hybrid force. And so people continue to die. The Sudanese government continues, and the rebels continue. They're killing with impunity.
Well, tell me, should this not be accepted, though, at least, and built upon, or should it be just rejected out of hand, and should the Security Council forward move?
It shouldn't be rejected.
Okay.
It should be built upon, but we should be aiming for the deployment of a force that's sufficient to protect the civilians at risk. And I fear that this hybrid, which we are spending so much diplomatic capital getting the Sudanese to agree to, falls well short of what's necessary to protect civilians.
Just completed a poll we're going to release in a couple of days in the Middle East on Arab attitudes toward this, actually Muslim attitudes across the board. And it was interesting the degree to which we'll have the full results next week on the show. They're going to be aired on some of the other networks during the week. It's interesting the degree to which people already care, but care more when they get more information. And I must say that here as well, the concept Darfur is one that people gravitate toward, but there's not a lot of content into the concept. Who's failed on this, and where does one go? What does one do to sort of move this agenda forward?
Well, obviously, I haven't seen the results of your polling, but I'd say that they sound very similar to a poll that PIPA did recently on global attitudes, including toward Darfur. And what they found was a great deal of interest around the world at the popular level in doing the right thing in principle, but a lot of ignorance about Darfur in particular, including in the United States, although less so here than elsewhere. 65% of the American people, two polls have found, would support sending U.S. troops as part of an international force to save lives in Darfur. That is not insignificant in light of the setbacks we've experienced in similar ventures like in Somalia in the 1990s. So I think the challenge is, in the United States and elsewhere, to educate and mobilize the populations, to make people understand what's at stake. These are 450,000 innocent Muslims who have died as a result of this, this genocide. And that's unacceptable. It would be unacceptable no matter who they are and where they were. But it's particularly unacceptable that the international community has mustered the will to act in other places and isn't even really seriously contemplating comparable action in Darfur.
I thought that King Abdullah's speech in Riyadh at the beginning of the Arab League summit, where he, in one line, it was very short, but it was interesting, said that our neglect has created the need for foreign intervention. He actually found fault with a number of Arab problems. We're going to talk about that in the next. It was a short but very self-critical speech. And then he actually created some movement in the summit where they were talking with the Sudanese, etc.